My name's Felicia Rose, and this is the Scars and Stillness podcast. Thank you for coming back for episode 9 of our series. As always, I want to do a trigger warning on our episode. Everything that we talk about involves trauma, and so there are things that could be pretty it could cause like some emotions. So just make sure that you're checking in on yourself. Remember that you, of course, are the most important. And it's just really important for us to continuously check in on ourselves and make sure that we're doing okay. So with that being said, let's get right into it. So last week's episode 8, we talked about anxiety, depression, and survival. Um, with that, of course, we have like the inner battle going on and how a lot of us will suffer in silence for however long, instead of, talking about what's going on with us. And so this episode is regarding self-talk and self-identity after trauma, um, which which can be a lot. So just really quick, I just want to kind of let everyone know, as always, I have my laptop over here. I've got some notes on here, so that way I can make sure that I'm hitting all the pinpoints that I want and to stay on track. So if I look over, that's what I'm doing. If you are listening on Spotify and if I pause for however long, that's probably what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm staying on topic and I'm staying focused and that we're touching all the points that we want to touch. So, kind of moving right into it, um, trauma with identity. So, how trauma distorts self-worth. For an example, like the thoughts that we have in our head, like, I'm unlovable, I'm not enough, I'll never amount to anything. Just things like that, which obviously has been taught to us over time because of whatever, because of our trauma, abuse, addictions, whatever the case may be. It's kind of been ingrained in there. Those things like we're unlovable, we're not enough, things like that. Um, and I have a note here that says survivors often internalize the abuser's voice as their own inner critic. Um, I cannot stress this enough. So I've had conversations with people defending myself and people I know that were or are in active abusive relationships where you hear someone make a comment like, "Well, I just don't understand why he or she would do that. Why would he or she agree with that person or why would he or she, make those choices or why wouldn't they leave?" Just things like that. Those are really common questions that people who are obviously inexperienced with that, I wouldn't say they're dumb comments. I would just say that they're obviously uneducated on the process of abuse and, like, the lingering effects that it has on a person. For an example, um, oftentimes when you're in an abusive relationship, your identity completely and totally merges into the abuser's identity, especially if drugs are involved. If any form of addiction is involved, you can basically kiss your self identity goodbye. Like if it's not the abuser, it's the drugs or a bit of both. So that one line that I wrote there is really powerful for me where, survivors often internalize the abuser's voice as their own inner critic. For an example on what I mean by that is it is super common for an abuser to tear you down saying things like that. "You're not lovable. No one else could love you except for I could love you," or "No one else could love you the way that I love you," or "You're a terrible mom. You wouldn't be a good mom without me. You're nothing without me." Um, you are right. You are too broken. You are too crazy. No one else would want you, so you might as well just stay with me. Those kind of comments tear you down. And as I've mentioned in previous podcast or previous episodes, sorry, not previous podcast, we have one podcast. Like, obviously a sober brain or a person who hasn't been around the abuser, you're not gonna buy it, right? You're not gonna believe all the crazy talk from the abuser like I'm nothing and I am too crazy or too broken and no one else would love me but him. But after a while, after hearing that enough, it really does just weigh on you. And so after a while, those words and what they're saying to you literally will become your identity, right? And so we internalize the abuser's voice in our own brains and we think that it's us. We think that it's ourselves. Like we carry that with us where, maybe you're clean and sober for a prolonged period of time and you're wanting to go after a job that you really want and you think that you could do it, but then you have that internal voice that's saying, "Of course you couldn't do it. You're not good enough for a job like that. You're too broken for a job like that, or you don't know what you're doing, or you're uneducated, or you know what I mean?" Like you spiral and you go into these critical thoughts and you believe that it's you, when really it's trauma. It's that abuser's voice that's so attached inside of you, and it's really hard. At first, I would definitely say it's really hard to kind of realize, like, what is their voice and what's your voice. I've mentioned in a previous episode where I've even currently now, I'll say stuff like when I have, like, thoughts flood me, I'll say stuff like, "That's not true. That's not real," or "Real," "Is that real or is that not real?" So I work it out in my brain, and obviously everyone's gonna do it a bit different, but it does take a lot of time to kind of remove that abuser's voice inside your head. We've also mentioned before that, physical abuse, it hurts during the time in which you're being abused, but all the other forms of abuse are so much worse. Like, the verbal and mental and spiritual, all those kinds of abuses are so much worse because it tears you down and it completely annihilates, like, your soul and your foundations and who you are as a human being. And, like I had mentioned before too, is like I've lost myself, and losing my complete identity, where I was stripped down to bone and not knowing at all who I was probably one of the most painful things that I've ever had to deal with. And then also backtracking and having to figure out who I was after going through all that trauma and all that abuse was also very challenging. It was also very difficult because of this. You're having to figure out, like, is that me or is that him? What is the truth there? And then you have to constantly tell yourself, like, I'm not crazy. I am worthy of love. I am deserving of good things. Which brings us into our next point, which is the power of self-talk. So, little points that I put here: words create reality, how negative self-talk reinforce shame and fear. So, if you're faith-based, you already know that there's literally scripture in the Bible about our tongue, that, our tongue can become a weapon, like it can produce good or evil, you know? And so it's always really important what we say because it can become something good for us or something bad for us. You know what I mean? We can speak life or we can speak death. And I think negative self-talk, you're literally speaking it out. You're speaking death over yourself and over your everything that you're going through and everything that you're becoming. Um, and I will say, um, out of everything that we've talked about so far, right? Out of everything that we've been over so far, these two episodes that we've done, so last week's episode and this week's episode, the anxiety and depression and the self-talk and identity after trauma, these two episodes for me, I think personally are the two hardest things that you have to go through after becoming free from abuse or addiction. Because this is the stuff that's like lifelong, you know? Like, and I had mentioned last week that, some mental health disorders like anxiety or depression or PTSD, they are lifelong. They will last your whole life. And there's no shame in that. I feel like there's such a stigma on mental health disorders. It just drives me nuts. That's a totally different topic. But um, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in having something that has happened to you that you feel like changed you, because it did. These things that have happened to us in our life, they have changed us and shaped us into who we are now. And yes, there are things where you're like, "Man, I wish that never happened to me because I wish I wasn't like XYZ," but also there are some benefits to it. You know what I mean? Like, as mentioned before, I think people who have overcome abuse or addiction, I think that they find more joy in the small things. I think that you really realize how fragile life is and how you really wanna make each day count, and you kinda go for it because we've all been in a position where, like, what do we have to lose? Because we've been completely at the bottom, so we might as well go for it. You know what I mean? Like, we might as well just go for it and take a leap of faith. Um, but so the power of self-talk is no joke. These are things that I feel like is you're gonna be working through this probably for the rest of your life. And so that's why the next thing is learning to catch those thoughts. And like I had just said, is this my voice or is it the abuser's voice? So just differentiating that, like figuring out if that's his or hers, whichever, or if it's yours, if it belongs to you. And then I think I think that's one of the most important steps is figuring out which is which. And then you can replace the lies with truth and with compassion. So you can remove those from you, like, "That's not true, that's not mine." What is true is I am enough. Yes, I have trauma, and that's okay, but I'm healing and it's gonna be okay. It's getting better. So obviously replacing that lie with a truth and then also being compassionate with yourself or you know what I mean? Like we need to be kind to who we are. I know that healing is annoying and I know that trauma is frustrating and I've been really transparent about how oftentimes I feel like I'm out of my mind and I feel like I go through spirals sometimes where I will literally feel like I am too crazy or I'm too broken or I can't be in relationships or I can't be happy and I'm better off alone. That's a spiral. You know what I mean? That is a negative spiral that it'll grab me and it'll drag me down. And so I have to work through that. I have to regularly work through that and be like, I don't think that's true. I think that I am worthy of love. I think I am worthy of good things. I think that I'm having a trigger trauma response from something that happened, and that's also okay. Acknowledge you know what I mean? Acknowledging our trauma and that, sometimes trauma sticks and, it kind of just becomes another piece of our armor that we wear on our that we wear, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that finding, like, internal peace and harmony in your life and inside your soul is honestly what's most important because most likely the trauma won't go away. Most likely the negative self-talk and stuff it will never fully go away, but having the love and compassion and power to work with yourself, even if it's a daily thing, sometimes I have to do it 15 times a day, just same thing, going through it and realizing like that's not true. I'm gonna let that go and I'm gonna put on truth and compassion and kindness for myself. So our next point is identity work after trauma. So, I think that I've kind of talked about this. I'm not sure if I talked about it on my podcast or if I talked about it in a workshop. Um, but basically it's asking, who am I when I'm not in survival mode? Like, what do I look like? When I'm not in a position to be in survival mode, who am I? You know what I mean? And for me, that one question alone, it took a while for me to answer that because I feel like for the majority of my life, I was in survival mode. Like, it was activated because it had to be. And so when I've had these very few moments in my life where I've had the calm and safety where it's not activated anymore and it's like my true self, who am I? You know? And for me, that's when I kind of realized that I'm introverted. Safety is really important to me. Kind of being able to predict or control my environment is really important to me. And yes, I know that that comes from trauma, comes from abuse, and those kind of things, that's also okay. There's some things that there's no point for us to fight. There's no point for us to always try to fix or correct or change everything about us that wasn't the way it was before. So like that, like it's important for me to feel safe and feel like my environment's predictable and I can control the outcome and control the environment. Obviously, I know that I can't control everything. In truth, I probably can't control anything. Um, and just being able to kind of acknowledge that, but be kind with myself and still realize that, like, I can control some things in my environment, and the things I can't control, I'm gonna give that to God. Or, I'm gonna give that to the universe. I'm gonna, whatever the case may be. But I feel like that just kind of covers you with a peace almost. Like you're not having to carry the whole weight of everything, the whole weight of what ifs, and you're just kind of putting it out there like so you know what I mean? Like, who I am when I'm not in survival mode, there are some good things, and then there are some not so good things, and both of those make up who I am. And then the next pinpoint is reclaiming identity piece by piece, values, strengths, passion, boundaries. Um, and I feel like, honestly, when you go through freedom after abuse or you go through, treatment or things like that or counseling for abuse or whatever whatever you do that works for you, you know how it says reclaiming identity piece by piece, about values, strengths, passions, boundaries, those kind of just come. They come with sobriety, they come with healing and working through your trauma, you know what I mean? You start rediscovering who you actually are without that person or without that drug, and you remember yourself. You remember, "Oh, yeah, I forgot that I love to do this," or I forgot how much I loved music," or, whatever it was. And then and so then you can start realizing, like, who you are. Now, I mean, because 'cause we're gonna be a little bit different, but then our values are gonna come back. You're gonna realize like, "Oh, yep, this is still very important to me. This is still very important to me." And then strengths, like um, I mentioned this in a previous video also where, you earn your strength. You earn that because, like, people aren't born, um, you know what I mean? They're not born resilient. Like, you earn it through trials and tribulations. You earn your armor. You know what I mean? So, I think finding the positive in your strength versus the negative in your strength, like, for an example, like, for me, I like, the tattoo that I have on my arm where, like, I wear my tragedies as armor, not shackles. For me, that's huge because I can take my story and I can tell people about some of the things that I've been through, and, being able to have a platform where I feel like I can help other people, that's huge for me because, in a not so hot, great world, um, I feel like banding together is honestly really important and feeling like you're not alone with something so heavy. So I think acknowledging our strengths, but also finding goodness in our strengths is really important. And then boundaries just kind of come. You learn that in counseling, you learn it in treatment, you realize your worth a little bit more, and you realize like, nope, that's a no for me, that's not going to happen. And so you're able to kind of put up boundaries with people or with, yourself or whatever it is. And so that kind of just happens. Um, and if it's something that you're going through right now, boundaries is one that can be really challenging and tricky, especially if it comes to family or, you know what I mean? Like, not all of us have healthy family members. And it is okay. It's absolutely okay to set a boundary with that, regardless if they're family or not. Being blood tied and family with someone does not mean that they're allowed to treat you however they want. You know what I mean? You still deserve love and respect and safety, and if people are gonna cross that boundary, then we're gonna set a new one, and, like, it doesn't matter what people say about how, "Oh, that's your family, you don't have to do anything." If they're not treating you with love and safety and respect, then we can put a boundary there. So, boundaries are a harder one, and if you need help with boundaries, there's a lot of, like, tools and tricks and workshops online that you can do, like, kind of tools, like, for your tool belt that you can use with boundaries that are great. They're amazing. Or, of course, if you're in counseling or treatment, you can even talk to your counselor about, like, "I need help with, learning better boundaries," and they usually have, like, full courses they can teach you on it, and it's amazing. I really enjoyed learning about boundaries because that was something I kind of struggled with at first, was boundaries, especially with the family thing I'd mentioned. That's something I actively have to do on a regular basis, so boundaries are super important. The next point is practical tools and practices. So, this is the same thing as, like, self-care that we've talked about multiple times now, and it's gonna look completely different for everybody. So, kind of what I mean by that is, like, if for me, obviously, I'm a writer, so a practical tool and practice for me is writing, journaling, kind of getting those emotions and thoughts out of there, like, and, like, not allowing them to stay in my body. Or, like, if you don't wanna write, even talking to a person, like, talking to another person that you feel is safe and that you trust, like, maybe your partner or your best friend or whoever it may be, um, about it. Like, so that way you can just completely release it from yourself in some form, and it's not inside you anymore, just kind of festering. Um, Another thing that I had put on here was mirror work or recording your own affirmations in your voice. Um, so I remember the first time I heard about stuff like this, I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. But so what I mean by mirror work is two things. So what I had learned in my treatment was that you can either A, write positive affirmations on your mirror with like a dry erase marker, or B, you can self-talk with yourself in a mirror. Like you can look at yourself in a mirror and say, "You're beautiful. You're enough. You're more than the anxiety that you feel this morning. You're more than that weight on that scale. You're more than your jean size." Like whatever it is that you're feeling something about that day, mirror work is actually really effective. If it feels completely weird and unnatural for you, sticky notes I know is a big one. It's an option that like you can put a sticky note in your car when you're on your way to work. You can look down and, you know, have a note that says I'm enough. For me, I don't do mirror work anymore. I don't do mirror affirmations. I have kids, and as much as I don't want them to touch the mirrors, they like to just smudge and mess up my mirrors, and it drives me nuts. So I have to actively clean my mirrors, probably twice a week. So it's not a realistic thing for me. I actually have an app on my phone that allows me to create widgets for my lock screen on my iPhone. And so I'm able to create positive affirmations on my lock screen. So every time I look at my phone, if I'm looking at the time or whatever on my phone, there's a positive affirmation there. Like I have ones that say, I am enough. I'm not hard to love. I'm worthy of love. Um, I'm not too broken. Just things like that. You know what I mean? So whatever float your boat. Like, whatever you're really needing, they have things that are free that you can do to phones are a huge one at this point because we always all have our phones, but, yeah, so just kind of figuring out a way to have those positive affirmations that you see or that are influencing your brain every day, I think is really important because it is really important that we're careful of, like, what we watch, what we listen to, what we speak, what we read, like, because it's all kind of in a way influencing us. It's influencing our thoughts, it's influencing our insecurities, it's influencing our self-worth, and so you know what I mean? Like, if you're an extremely insecure person and you feel like you're not enough or, you're not pretty enough, skinny enough, whatever the case may be, and you're forever scrolling Instagram and you're seeing all these people who seem skinnier, prettier, their life's on track more than you, that is a not a good thing because you're putting it in your brain subconsciously like that's what I have to look like to feel better. Like I have to be those things to be happy and that's so not true. Like we are worthy of it, love. We are enough the way that we are. Um and this is coming from somebody with body dysmorphia. So I get it. I am my own worst enemy, especially with my outside figure, like what I look like on the outside, my hair, my skin. I'm a human being. Sometimes I break out and I have acne. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? So this unrealistic expectation that women have especially. I know men do too. I know men do too. Men have unrealistic expectations for themselves in other ways. Some it is physical traits, but I've known people men who have severe insecurities with their physical traits, like not being big enough or buff enough or, not feeling strong enough, or vice versa, being too big, too buff, and so it creates those insecurities. N But it's just really important for us that we kind of keep a handle on the things around us because it will influence us, and then, like I had said earlier, like, our thoughts become reality, etcetera, you know what I mean? So, anyways, kinda moving on from that. Another one on here, of course, is therapy or safe community, reflecting back on who you are. So if you're not down for therapy, that's totally okay. I wasn't down for therapy until, like, 2 years ago. Um, and now I'm kind of at a place where I'm like, "Man, I don't know what I would do without having my therapy every week." Um, but yeah, if that's not your thing, that safe community reflecting back on who you are, awesome. Like, for an example, like, I had mentioned that my family were real earthy people. We find comfort in earth, we find comfort in, you know, air and stuff around us. So, um, like, something for that, like, you can go make sure that you're going to, like, community hikes or something, like, you're safe in a community with people who enjoy the things that you enjoy, but you're still getting something beneficial out of it. Like, you're getting that nature, you're getting the fresh air, and you're around healthy people. Um, whatever works for you is honestly the whole point of this. And then, of course, again, rebuilding identity through creativity. Um, this is a really big one for me, obviously. So, what I mean by that is writing, art, movement, um, really anything that you can do to create and heal, I think is a really beautiful thing. So writing books or poetry or painting or drawing or coloring, even coloring with your kids. And what I mean by movement is like, working out or, you know what I mean? Like just joining a healthy, um, HIIT class or a healthy yoga class or whatever, something that you can do. Meditation, like if you wanna do a guided meditation with other people that makes you feel connected with your inner self, then awesome. It's just kind of finding tools and practicing those tools to kind of help you. Um, okay, sorry, that was a little bit of a long one. So, my next point is common struggle survivors face, and the first pinpoint I put was guilt for not being enough. Um, Man, I honestly think that that's one of the most, if not the, like, the one that everyone will think about where you go through a feeling and a phase where you're like, "I'm not enough," you know? You feel guilty for, not being good enough. Um, I know that just guilt in general is super common. If you're an addict, feeling guilty that you were ever an addict, feeling that shame and that guilt to even share your story or tell people. Sorry about that. To, even tell people that you are in recovery or things like that. I know that guilt in general and shame is really, really common. My next one is feeling fake or selfish when speaking kindly to yourself. That one is completely huge for me. Because some days where, I'm just like not having it, where I'm like, "You're beautiful and you're enough and you're a good mom and look at you, you're so gorgeous," and blah blah blah. I literally feel like, "Yeah, okay." Like, let me just lie to myself today. But even though you have days where you're like, "This is stupid. Like, this isn't believable at all. Like, I don't even believe it. Why am I telling myself that?" Repetition, you know what I mean? Like, again, what we speak, we can either speak life or we can speak death. Even if we're not believing it at that time, we're still speaking life over ourselves. We're speaking healing over ourselves, and it's still really important. But it is really common to feel fake, or weird when you're speaking kindly to yourself and you don't believe it at that time. Um, the next one is fear of not recognizing who you are without the trauma. So, kind of what I mean by that, in one of my last episodes, I believe it was episode 7, where safety still hurts. That's kind of what I'm talking about with this one, is you become so accustomed and abuse and chaos and trauma becomes so normalized in your life that when things slow down and your lid is closed, you're not in a survival brain anymore, and you're safe, you're kind of terrified of what's gonna happen because you don't know what to expect. This is something completely new, and so you have that fear of not recognizing who you are. Or, like, who I don't even know who I am. Like, I don't know who I am when I'm happy because 'cause I've never been genuinely happy. It's things like that. That is super common. It's a super common fear, and it's totally valid because people who have been through chaos and abuse and trauma their entire lives, like, to an extent, you don't know who you are. You don't know who you are without trauma because you've never been given the opportunity to learn. So I think in this situation, just having kindness for yourself and saying like, I'm afraid, but that's okay. It's okay to be afraid. I'm going to give my fears, to the universe. I'm going to give my fears to God. I'm going to, write my fears down. I'm just going to get it away from me and I'm just going to kind of move forward and I'm going to be kind to myself regardless of what happens. And, like just kind of walking yourself through it. A lot for me when it comes to self-talk, I feel like I'm like holding my own hand and walking through life. I'm comforting myself and we're taking baby steps together or me and my higher power, like me and God, like we're taking very slow baby steps towards healing. Um, and I mean honestly, especially for people who have had trauma and abuse their entire lives or the majority of your life, like again, like, things might not go away. But that doesn't mean that we can't live a life where we're happy. I mean, and if you don't feel like you're genuinely happy, at least you can find peace and stillness where you don't always have to feel on edge or you don't always have to feel like you're in survival brain. So I did write a little note, um, and I said, if your inner voice sounds more like the abuser than yourself, you're not failing, you're learning to heal. Every kind word you speak to yourself is rebuilding against the lies trauma left behind. So I feel like that quote speaks volumes. I don't really have to say much about it, but it is really, really important to understand that you are not the lies that are in your head. We're not. We're more than that. And even though we don't believe it, we are worthy of good things. We deserve having a healthy, safe, free, secure life, you know? Um, and so I'm about done with the episode. I would like to encourage everyone um to maybe take a small step towards like finding a practice tool that you can do this week, maybe, you know, writing or, talking to someone or the mirror work or even getting that, the little widgets on your phone, just something where you're moving forward with putting yourself first and flooding yourself with kindness instead of, like, having that, default negativity, I think would be really cool. Um, that's kind of all I have for today. I'm just kind of going with it, you know what I mean? And I was planning on coming in today and just letting it take me where it needed to take me, whether that meant our episode was gonna be 20 minutes or an hour. I just wanted to kind of talk about all the things and get to a point where I felt like, "This is good. This is a good calm spot to stop." So again, I just wanna thank all of you for tuning in and hanging out with me today for our episode 9. Um, and it's just really important for me that you guys understand that you're enough. You're not too broken. You're beautiful the way that you are. Um, and you're never not worthy of love. You're never too gone to save. You're never too broken to fix. You know what I mean? And I see you, and I just thank you guys so much for the support that you guys continue to give me. If this is something that you're interested in, please like and subscribe if that's something that you want to do, or feel free to follow me on my other platforms. I know that it's really hard to see in that, but I do also have them attached in my bio. And I hope to see all of you for episode 10, and I hope you guys have a really great rest of your week.